Hello, my name is Codemaster Jamal, and today I'm coming to you from my mom's house in South Carolina. I hope everyone's doing okay in quarantine. Today is going to be a special video. I usually don't do videos like this where I put myself on camera, at least I stopped doing videos like that. But today we're going to be talking about how I learned to code. The purpose of this video is not just to discuss my background when it comes to programming, but also to, I guess, give you guys a bit of info on how you can learn how to code yourself and how to do it the free way. You know, you don't have to buy an online course or spend hundreds of dollars. Don't listen to these con artists out here that tell you to buy all these courses when you can honestly learn to do it by yourself for free. Because there's plenty of resources on the internet for free that you can use to learn how to code that give you real life examples on how to do it. So that's what today's video is about. These are basically my study habits on how I learned how to code. Hopefully you can use these same habits to kind of transform your way of thinking. A lot of people, when they talk to me about how I can get into programming or how I can get into game development, a lot of it has to do with the way how you think. If you look at something like it's too hard to do or if it's too complicated, you're already putting a blockade on your mind itself. You're already telling your mind that this is something that you cannot do. A lot of it has to do with you changing your way of thinking, and if you change your way of thinking, then chances are you can learn anything. One simple mental technique can be used to learn any job skill, whether it comes to construction, programming, marketing, you name it. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so to begin this video, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of my backstory, and this is how I got into programming, how I got into code. A lot of it started when I was in middle school. My earliest computer science class was in the 6th grade. I remember a teacher by the name of Mr. Boyd, and what kind of turned me off about computer science at first was actually his class, because we basically didn't learn anything. All we learned was how to use Microsoft Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, which I think any kid, any person in my age group could have learned that by themselves. So like, I was really turned off by computer science at first because of that teacher. So I took that in the 6th grade, and then 7th grade I kind of skipped computer science. I didn't take it again. And then in the 8th grade, I took it again with a different teacher. And this teacher, I feel really bad because I can't remember her name because she's influenced me a lot. I just remember she was a very, very stout lady. She had these big round glasses, curly black hair. That's about it, but I can't remember her name to save my life, and I feel really bad about that. So basically, one year, we started learning HTML. And let me be the first one to say that I never got an A in school, like, ever, and like in anything else. Like, I've never been good at, like, reading. I've never been good at math, science, social studies. I was never good at anything else. This was the first time I actually got an A in school, and it almost felt like I didn't have to try. I noticed that I was pretty much the only one that actually passed that quiz or that test that time, and I noticed a lot of people were actually having problems with it, but for me it was like second nature. Basically what she used to teach us HTML was a website called W3 Schools. You can look it up online, w3schools.com. It's where I went to actually learn HTML, CSS, JavaScript, PHP, and SQL. So I learned 5 of the most used programming languages when it comes to web-based projects and stuff like that, and it's all for free, by the way. Their study guide will work really well with anyone if you take the time to learn and discipline yourself. A lot of it has to do with self-discipline. Anyone can learn how to code, but that might not be the same thing for everyone. Everyone might not have that same self-discipline, and some people might need, I guess, an additional teacher to kind of help them. She taught us HTML, and from there I kind of started teaching myself more programming languages, but that's when I got into high school. You see, around high school was when a game called World of Warcraft came out. And because my parents, like my dad was like, nah, I'm not gonna spend $15 a month on World of Warcraft, I was like pretty much like the only kid that, not only, but I was the only nerd in my school that wasn't playing World of Warcraft. I wasn't rocking with World of Warcraft. So instead of World of Warcraft, there was another game that I got into called Galadoria Online, which was this text-based role-playing game. And it was pretty cool because it had its own like kind of turn-based battle system that used the sprites from Fire Emblem and a lot of PHP-based code where you and let's say someone else on the forum can duke it out, which is pretty cool. You know, you could go to the shop and buy armor and weapons for your character, and you can buy like potions and stuff like that. So that was the first time I ever saw something like that with a website. It was kind of like Neopets, but I guess more medieval fantasy based. And that's essentially what got me into making like browser-based MMOs, or at least attempting to get into browser-based MMOs. And you know, it's kind of stupid because you think that because you know HTML, especially at that young of an age, that you basically know everything. And what I come to find out was that I needed to know a lot more in order to make a web-based browser game. So that was kind of my mission. Now, I started off with some watered down projects. I realized that I couldn't do it at first, but over time, I kind of learned JavaScript, PHP, CSS through messing with different forum softwares. Galadoria was actually ran with a forum software called vBulletin. So I started messing with different things like Zeta boards and PHPB and simple machines and stuff like that. That's basically what helped me learn the PHP side of browser games. So that's what I kind of focused on. And this was also something that I kind of kept away from like my friends and like family. I was like really secretive about it. Yeah, so I didn't really tell my friends or family about this. It's kind of something I kind of kept secret from people for long as a time. So that's why today I'm a lot more open about it now. Now, here's the thing. Even though I've been really passionate about programming and coding, I haven't always been coding this entire time. In fact, there was a time period where I actually stopped programming completely. And I guess what really happened to me was that a lot of it has to do with like social issues, like social pressures. It was a different time period, I guess, back then, you know, like during the 90s and like early 2000s. If you use the internet for anything other than Facebook or like MySpace, you know, you're a nerd basically. I don't know, people just had a different mindset about programmers. I became a little bit more closed off, and overall I stopped programming, not because I hated it, but because to a certain degree I was moving on to something else. You see, towards the end of high school, I was getting like more social. I was running a role-playing forum called Pokemon RP Center. I feel really bad because I let down my community because we were going really strong, but I ended up closing it due to selfish reasons because it was my senior year. I was always a shut-in and stuff like that, so I decided out of nowhere that my senior year I was going to be more social and more open with people. Because of that, my game ended up kind of going under the water, and I got more into like music and stuff like that. And as I got into music, I became more open with other people. This was around the time that I started playing bass guitar, which, you know, a lot of people kind of looked at kind of weird because it's like most people start off learning an instrument when they're like 12 or 13. So I started off when I was 17 years old learning how to play bass. I still coded, trust me. I still went on those same forum websites and I still checked up with my people and stuff like that. And every once in a while I would get like some type of brainstorm for a video game, and I would write that down because a counselor in my summer camp during the 10th grade told me that if you ever have a great idea, write it down in a notebook. So basically, I began to kind of fall into the social pressures that a lot of people have. Oh, it's not cool to be smart. It's kind of stupid, especially if you grow up in, you know, small town USA. It's like, oh, computer science, why would you want to do that? Like, that's the type of mentality you come across with people. So eventually I became like more and more close off with people, and I guess I was just trying to really relate with other people. I got caught up with a lot of stupid nonsense, and that's the truth about that. Eventually, what really closed me off from programming was when I tried to build an MMO completely from scratch. Right? So like I got into Blender. You can see like some of my earlier 3D models with Blender, and I believe my first 3D model took me 3 hours to complete. So I started doing the math that if it takes me 3 hours to complete one model, and you know that MMOs have like thousands of models, so I'll have to make a bunch of different models in order to make my game, because at that point I knew that if I'm going to build an MMO, I'm going to have to do it by myself, and I wouldn't have anyone to actually help me with it because, you know, I'm living in a town where it's like I'm trying to get people into game development. It takes a lot of work, and I guess a lot of people, you know, they really just didn't want to waste any time with that. So I tried building an MMO on my own at first, and I failed. I failed because I realized that it would take a lot of time to do the 3D models. It would take a lot of time to learn networking. I didn't know diddly squat about networking, and then I was trying to build things with Unity, and at the time I didn't know enough about programming to even like touch Unity. Dead serious. I did not know enough about C#, or back then you could use JavaScript with Unity. I didn't know enough to even touch Unity. Okay, so I was editing this video, and I just wanted to add that the moral of this story is that if you continue to do something, no matter how hard it is, how tough it is, even if it's something that requires 100 or 1,000 people, theoretically speaking, you will accomplish it. Because what I forgot to mention in this video was that had I kept going with my pursuit of making this MMO, I eventually would have created my MMO. Regardless of if it was successful or not, I would have finished eventually. If I kept going through with it, I would have gained a lot of experience and I would have learned a lot of different things if I continued to go through with things. So that's all I wanted to add to that. So I kind of got into this mindset that, like, you know what, this stuff is not cool and maybe I should be focusing on different things. And I was playing bass for a while, and from school I started meeting different people, and before I knew it, I started playing in a band. I played in a lot of different bands. I made some great music with people. I wish I had more recordings of me playing, but unfortunately a lot of those things have been lost, and you know, it's the music industry, so that's really all I can say. Now, I've gone on a little too longer than I originally anticipated, but this was basically the time period that I stopped coding, which is the time I started playing in a band, and then I was a chef at one point, and then became an Uber driver, and then, you know, boom, I started coding again. Okay, so now we're getting to the very, very last part of this video, which is the main purpose I wanted to share with you guys, was my study habits for how I learned how to code in such a short amount of time. Hopefully these study habits will help you and will help you pursue your career in programming. There's a lot of different ways to learn how to code. You can learn how to code online, you can learn how to code through some type of boot camp, and then there's also books. I think a lot of people that learned how to code, traditionally speaking, started off with books. Now this book here is what I took in school. Let me actually start off with what I started off with. This book here was actually published through my school at Miami-Dade College. It's probably not the best book to actually learn from. It's called The Zen of C++ by Adnan Zejnilovic. You could look it up. You might be able to buy it from some places, but once again, it's not the best book to learn C++. It gives you a lot of coding examples, but it's very, very brief. A lot of it is very, very abrupt. Here, I'll show you a few pages from inside. Hopefully I don't get like some type of copyright strike. It gives you a few different programming examples and stuff like that. What it also breaks down is the core principles of programming, which is stuff like functions, data types, loops. Before taking this class, yeah, even though I was doing like a web-based browser game, I never once used a loop. Not just a refresher, but it fortified the core principles of programming. And if you can understand those core principles of programming, you can learn any language. You can shift to any language. You can learn Perl, you can learn Python. If you can understand the core principles of programming, which I'll do in another video to break down more of what I'm trying to say. If you can learn those core principles, you can master any language. A language doesn't become a barrier anymore to you. Once you understand that pretty much every language has data types, every language has functions, every language has loops. You know, they might have a different way of writing the loop, but it's still a loop. So yeah, I took this class, I passed it with a C. It's Intro to Java Programming. It's a class that they use to kind of teach you object-oriented programming. So like, that's kind of how the curriculum was at Miami-Dade. So they gave you C++ to kind of give you the bare bones of programming and stuff like that. Then they throw you into Java, which is a lot harder. Basically, what I like about books is that they give you a lot more information than what's available on the internet. Like, they go into more detail about things, so that if you do really want to learn a subject, sometimes a book really isn't that bad. And it's the exact same amount of reading that you would have to do online. And these are from actual professionals that have worked in the field. This is more of a college textbook. You would definitely be able to buy this online like any other college student. Look it up. It's from Pearson Education, Pearson Higher Learning. So this is for an intro to Java class, and as you can see, it was already in bad shape when I got it, so I'm really trying my best to kind of keep it together. And that's what I will tell you about going to school for programming, is that in school they teach you more like fundamental stuff, like stuff that you wouldn't be able to learn on your own, stuff like UML diagrams. This is basically how I learned to code. So we're talking about study habits. So like when I was in Java, what I would actually do to learn this book, because you can see this is a pretty thick book. Like, this book is like literally, it's like the size of a phone book. It's literally more than 1,000 pages. Now, I probably needed to learn 800 of these pages just to get through the class. Yeah, what I'm going to say is basically what I would do to learn from this book was that I would go ahead, read the entire chapter, and then I'll go back, learn any vocabulary terms and stuff like that, write them down or either highlight them. I usually wouldn't look at the coding example the first time I read it, but the second time I read the chapter, I would go in and look at the coding example, and then the third time I read it, I wouldn't read any of the text. next, I would just go down and I would look at the coding example. I would actually type down what I saw in the coding example within the IDE. And the reason why you actually want to do this when you're learning programming is that you don't just want to look at the words on a page, because any book that you read, after 5 years, you're not going to remember anything that you read from it, right? And that's kind of a known fact. So that's why every 5 years, you got to kind of refresh yourself and take more classes and kind of just continue to practice it. So basically, you're not going to learn programming just by looking at tutorials or just by looking. The thing about programming, it's not just a visual thing, it's also a physical thing. And the reason why you actually want to actually type up the code as a teacher is typing it, or if you're watching a tutorial on YouTube, you want to actually practice programming by typing it as the video is going along. And the reason for this is because of how muscle memory works. It's not necessarily about typing or getting faster at typing, but you remember more things when you add a physical aspect to it. Like you remember, like, okay, how can I use this list, or how can I use this type of array by typing out that array? Like if you have to do a two-dimensional array, how can you remember how to type out a two-dimensional array? That's basically the idea behind it, is that you can't just look at something and expect to know everything. I mean, there are some people that are visual learners and they're that good, they could probably just look at it one time and memorize it. But if you really want to get good at programming, you got to really type out the examples. Imagine every YouTube tutorial I've ever watched, I've had to literally type out all of the examples. It wasn't just enough for me to just look at what they were writing on the screen. I had to type out all the examples, and that's what got me good at programming, was actually typing out the examples. The mind itself is a muscle. It's probably your strongest muscle in your body, or is the strongest muscle in your body. So just like any other muscle in your body, you have to work it out. How do you work out your brain? How do you work out this collection of nerves and stuff like that? You work it out by reading books, by educating yourself. If you don't educate yourself or try to put some time into learning something new, what happens is that your brain, it just becomes like this giant lump. Now, of course, in these books, at the end of the chapter, they have these like questions they ask you. I never had to answer any of them for any of my classes, but I would kind of answer them myself. So that's basically how I learned how to code. It's more or less a discipline. Like, yes, like programming is not all just about typing, but when you're learning code at first, you need to do a lot of typing. What you don't really want to do is memorize code, but what you want to do is get used to typing it. I guess in another video, I'll talk about don't learn how to program, learn how to problem solve. I really don't know how to end this video. I wish I could say more. I felt like I had more to say beforehand, but you know, I'm Codemaster Jamal. I'm always making crappy videos. So yeah, I guess this will be it for now. Anyhow, my name is Codemaster Jamal. Thanks for watching this video. If you like this video, please feel free to subscribe to the channel, as it helps out with my projects and my games. And till next time, this is Codemaster Jamal, and I'm signing out.
Season 2.